Okay, welcome everyone. This is Amy Brand. I'm with Jacobs. Welcome to the 17th meeting of the Stewart Restoration Advisory Board, or RAB. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. RAB members, hopefully I think everybody's sitting up here at the table. Do we have any RAB members online, Johanna? Bill Fetter is online. And Ed Lawson. Okay. Okay. So a couple just housekeeping kinds of things. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and we saved that recording, and we'll be placing those on YouTube, and we'll have a little discussion about that just a little bit later, but I want to remind you that the meeting is being recorded. Also, we have a new sound company here tonight. So I want to tell you how to use the microphones on the table. The microphones on the table are so the folks online can hear you, not people here in the room, as well as the one that I'm using. To activate it, you simply touch it, it turns red, and you're live. And then when you're not speaking, touch it again to turn it off. When you're speaking, you'll want to have it fairly close to you, so that the people online can hear. And folks online, if you can't hear, please type that into the chat so that those of us who are monitoring that WebEx can check that out. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and move forward. Next slide, please, Johanna. So we have a fairly full agenda. It looks about the same as always, but you all sent us a lot of RAB business discussion topics. We'll go through those, but I do want to keep things moving so that we can wrap up at 7:30, as close to on time as possible. So we have co-chair welcome from Lieutenant Colonel Thomas is here. Colonel Farrelly was not able to be here tonight. And Ed Lawson is online. Ed, I hope that we'll be able to hear you in the room when you speak, but I'm not positive about that, so I apologize. Again, we're using a new sound system tonight because the person who ran our sound previously had a medical emergency over Christmas and is recovering. So we'll go through RAB business. We'll have our updates on environmental projects at Stewart. After each of the main topics, we'll have an opportunity for RAB members to have questions and answers, and public questions will be at the end. Next slide. Okay, you can move on. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through the logistics relatively quickly. Please introduce yourself when you're speaking, and that is to help the people online be able to hear. And then we also have a court reporter who is also taking minutes of the meeting as well. RAB members, again, at the end of each presentation, RAB members may raise their hand to speak in the room or online. I say please observe a 3-minute limit. I don't time that, but we just want to make sure that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to speak and nobody is dominating the conversation. Anyone from the public who is not a RAB member, we hold those questions to the end of the meeting. So I apologize, even if you have a question early on, type it in your phone, jot it down, try to remember it for the end. If you're here in person, raise your hand and I will bring the microphone to you so that folks online can hear you. For those of you public participants who are online, if you would submit your questions through the question and answer function addressed to all co-hosts, and I'll show you in a minute how that works. And if for some reason we run out of time and we can't answer everybody's questions, we'll record those and get an email responses back out to everybody. Next slide. So real quick on, for those of you on WebEx, we keep the video off to save on bandwidth. You can open the participants list to see who's online. RAB members, scroll over your name to raise your hand to speak and unmute yourself when called on. And public participants, again, type your question into the all co-hosts in the Q&A panel. And we show you there on the slide how to do that. Next slide. Again, for those who are online, we do have some maps that I know when you're looking at, for me anyway, when you're looking at your laptop computer, they can be hard to see. It is possible to zoom in on a slide when you're online. There's a plus and minus percentage there at the top of the page. Next slide.
There's an echo.
So we would ask that everybody who's online be muted so we don't have feedback there. If we have any WebEx folks who are on the phone, hopefully you do have a copy of the slides. We did email them out to most of you by, it was sent by email. To raise your hand to be called on to speak, you dial *3 and you'll be unmuted, and that's for RAB members. Actually, there is no way to type your questions into the chat if you're on your telephone. So if you're a public member, we again ask you to hold those questions till the end of the meeting, and then we'll call on you. Next slide, please. So first, before I get into talking about the RAB members, I do want to apologize that we do not seem to have Spanish translation here tonight. She was booked and is a no-show. So I apologize, and we'll be following up on that. So I just wanted to address that. And so I'm very sorry if there was anyone depending on those services tonight. So in terms of introductions of RAB members, I'm not going to go through all the names here on the list. We are going to talk a little bit about the RAB members and some folks who have consistently not been able to come, or maybe they're not interested anymore and haven't let us know. And I've also highlighted here, Anthony Grice is in italics there as a government representative for the town of Newburgh. He notified me that he is no longer a representative of the town of Newburgh. He's still excuse me, I'm so sorry. My apologies. So he's no longer a representative. He is willing to still serve on the RAB, but would prefer that there be another city representative. He has reached out to them and not had any replies so far. So I probably ask Mr. Lawson and/or other RAB members to reach out to the city about finding another representative from the city. Next slide. And again, I'm not going to go through all the names. I'm trying to stay in the interest of time so we can get through our agenda. These are the same team that you generally see here from the Air National Guard team representing the National Guard Bureau. From Stewart Air National Guard Base tonight, again, we have Lieutenant Colonel Ben Thomas. He is the base civil engineer, and he's acting as the RAB co-chair for Colonel Fairley tonight, who was not able to be here. We have representatives from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, from the State Department of Environmental Conservation and Department of Health and contracting team. Next slide. So with that, I will turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Thomas, and hopefully we'll also be able to hear Ed.
Hello, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Thomas, for those who I haven't had a chance to meet yet. I am the base civil engineer at Stewart Air National Guard Base and the civil engineering squadron commander. I work directly for Colonel Fairley, who is our co-chair. He is unfortunately double booked this week. He's up in Vermont with the National Guard's Arctic Circle exploratory committee. So him and the wing commander are up there doing that right now, getting after that mission. And I'm happy to cover down here. Anyway, I've been a participant in this as a more of a back chair seater for since I got here last year, and so looking forward to an open dialogue tonight. Thank you. Ed, over to you if we're able.
Good evening, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Put the microphone up to the screen. Let's try that. Well, no, that's not going to help us in the room. That will only help online. Never mind. Ed, go ahead.
Again, my name is Ed Lawson. I lead an organization called Family and Community Engagement Services, Inc.
I don't think we're going to be able to hear him. The speaker's coming out of the screen here.
Okay. Well, I just want to welcome everyone, and I'm excited to have the conversation. We can move on, Amy, if you can't hear me.
What we don't have with this current audio setup is a system for projecting sound from WebEx onto speakers in the room. So we don't have speakers in the room at all. My microphone is catching up is helping the people online. Well, hold on. Ed, go ahead and try speaking. We have you on a cell phone and may be able to hear you in the room. Go ahead.
This is Bill Fetter. I was able to hear Ed, and he was just saying hello to everybody and anxious for a good meeting.
Yeah, I think we can all hear them on the WebEx. The problem is they don't have speakers in the room that will project any of our voices to the room. So the folks that are running the meeting can't hear us.
For the computers that put WebEx right. Thank you.
Let me remind you for speaking in the room, you need to turn the mic on and speak into it fairly closely.
Well, I'll just try to summarize a little bit. I mean, this is clearly far from acceptable, but he was trying to say we're trying to be collaborative. We're trying to work with the community. The community groups have been meeting regularly to try to coordinate and share information and be effective partners. We need to get a sound system that works hybrid.
I apologize for the sound system. I want you to be aware that our former sound system person was found unresponsive in his home due to carbon monoxide poisoning, and we had to scramble fairly last minute. So I apologize that it's not optimal. We're doing our very best. It does not project in the room. These microphones make it so that people online can hear us. And you'll probably want to keep them off unless you are speaking. So there is no projection in the room from these microphones. So I apologize. Things to fix for next time. So let me move on. So we'll go through RAB business. Just a couple quick reminders to send your RAB related email messages. This is a general Stewart Public Affairs address. It's a little bit different from the Dan Hodder address you have previously. Dan is going to be doing some traveling, and this ensures that the Public Affairs Office gets it, not just Dan in his personal email. So please use the Public Affairs email address. This was updated in your presentation today, and I can send that back out to the team. So it's not in the presentation, it's not in the printout, and it's not in the presentation you got online. Agenda planning meetings with the co-chairs. This is something we're starting up now. We had a meeting basically to have a Teams meeting among the co-chairs, myself, Bill, to discuss topics for upcoming meetings. And we're going to be getting into a cadence of doing that about a month after this meeting, which would be 2 months before the next meeting, so that RAB members, there's an opportunity for you to bring to Mr. Lawson what you'd like to see discussed at the next meeting, and he'll bring that to us, and we'll have a conversation about that in that agenda planning meeting with the co-chairs. Base tours, I recognize we have a couple new members to the RAB, and welcome to you here tonight. I am sure that you would like to get out on a base tour to see some of these sites and the interim stormwater treatment system. Others that have been on those tours before are welcome to come again and see them. But I think we're going to wait until there's a little bit better weather in the spring. So as soon as the things start to warm up, those will be scheduled and we'll get that information out to you. The 17K project update, I'm going to turn it over to Colonel Thomas.
Thank you, Amy. Actually, and thank you to Riverkeeper for staying after DOT and getting an update. I'm not a member of DOT, but for the sake of the public here and the folks that aren't on the RAB and didn't get Dan's email, I'll read DOT's response about the 17K drainage project. DOT continues to work with our project design and in-house environmental consultants to progress a State Route 17K drainage diversion capital project as a means to reduce stormwater flow into and assist in the ongoing Defense Department treatment of Wreck Pond. The design concept is now finalized and consists of cleaning out the existing drainage channel along State Route 17K, upgrading a total of 2 exit passage culverts located west of McGuire Way and at Orr Avenue, and installing a retention pond at a single location to mitigate future storm event issues. Complete field work includes survey work, wetland delineation, and archaeological screening of the majority of the impacted drainage corridor west of I-87. Additional field work and assessments associated with tree cutting along the drainage corridor and potential endangered bat habitat impacts are ongoing, as well as wetland delineation and archaeological screening associated with the finalization of the suitable retention location. Processes for any necessary DEC or USACE permitting and consultation associated with the diversion continues. Application submissions are pending. The project schedule is still expected to finalize the design approval document and advanced design plan by late summer, early fall of 2024, and have final plans, specifications, and estimates ready for letting the contract by the end of 24, early 25. The department anticipates being able to participate in the 2024 second quarter RAB meeting later this spring, which is scheduled for March? April. So it'll be the next meeting. The next meeting, DOT will be in person. Where our regional project and consultant staff will provide detailed plans for the diversion and upgrades, as well as answer stakeholder and public questions concerning the project. The department remains committed to getting this project done in a manner that is timely as possible. Heather Pillsworth, Public Information Officer from DOT.
I mean, we can hear you maybe here, but I don't think folks back there are going to hear this got to project.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that, but we can furnish copies to everybody, and we can forward that out to anybody who wants one. I can say anecdotally that DOT's design team has been on base several times, particularly at the gate in McGuire Way, to assess the lands for the retention pond that they're proposing. And so we've been an active participant, at least in that regard, in their design feasibility studies. So.
Sir, question.
Yeah.
Do you know if the current work that's happening along the side of 17K there, is that associated with the DOT?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware. It's not that I'm aware of. It's not associated with this effort but it may indeed be a DOT project. But it's not associated with this effort.
Right. Yeah, we did. So when Riverkeeper asked DOT for that update that we just heard, we asked that same question because we've been hearing about it. It's not related. It's a DOT approved project, but it's a private warehouse project that needs some kind of road work. So it's in the same location, but not related to the diversion.
Right. I mean, just, as an engineer, the development along 17K over the last several decades has been extensive, right? And so all of that has compounding effects on that watershed. And so that also complicates the diversion, but it seems like they've got a design that they're getting after, a design that includes all of that scope. Yeah.
we heard at one point or several times that there was estimated 20% of the water coming into the base was from this north of 17K through these two outflows. Now, this looks like they're combining them into one outflow now, or one retention basin. From what they heard, there's one on McGuire Way and one at Orange Avenue, and they're trying to install retention at a single location to mitigate future storm water issues. So what I'm getting at is it's 20%. We keep hearing that. Do we know what the total water coming in from all sources into the base are, into the retention basin, so that we can have an idea what that 20% is? Or have they put a gauge, a flow gauge on any of those retention basins or the outflow, so you can see what that 20% amount is? I don't understand if DOT, and I was hoping somebody from DOT would be here, how they can start designing a mitigation system if they don't even know how much water is actually coming in. Does that make sense, or am I beating the dead horse?
Mr. Thomas, honestly, I think DOT's approach is to divert the water from going under the base and then deal with the downstream effects, because it affects, the reason for a retention pond is it affects eventually the outflows that affect I-87. So the purpose of the retention pond is stormwater control versus containment. And that's the basis of design.
So, but how do they know how big the retention basin has to be?
It's based on the upstream watershed.
Right.
And inclusive of the development that's happened since then. So it's not just the base, but it's not just the diversion of the outfall that goes under the base. It's also what's upstream.
What's
as well.
upstream, but if they don't know what's coming into the base, which is their starting spot, I would think. I feel like we're missing a number here. And that number.
I think most of the questions on this will need to be asked in April.
It's a great question for DOT. Yeah.
Let's hear know the details.
Yeah.
On that. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that hangar fire solution system?
Right. I'll talk about matters that I actually know about. So hangar fire suppression system, back in November, and for those who don't know, our hangars on base, we have 3 large hangars that the Air National Guard uses, 2 hangars that the U.S. Marine Corps used. None of them have AFFF in them anymore. In 2012, our hangars were all converted to high expansion foam, HEF, which to our knowledge does not contain PFAS, right? That being said, Department of the Air Force policy has changed on all hangar foam, and we no longer use high expansion foam in hangars anymore. The system that is there is locked out and tagged out, and it is a water-only system now. That being said, on November 29th, while performing preventative maintenance on one of our hangars, we did experience a discharge of water through the deluge system. And there is, of course, residual HEF foam from when those systems were commissioned. And so we reported to Mr. Lawson when that happened. We reported it also to NGB. It's more of rather than a full discharge of foam, because the deluge hoods did not get the full did not get a full hit of foam, because those systems are locked out, tagged out, abandoned in place. But there is residual foam in the lines, and so it was visible in the water that came out. It was like a sort of like a soapy water, almost like you would have when you're washing the dishes. So we reported that. The contents of that went through our industrial wastewater system and is currently sitting in Lagoon A, which has not been dewatered yet. So it is sitting in that lagoon untouched. So that's where we stand with that. And we are working on a treatment system to treat that water before we discharge it. And that sort of leads me into the next subject, which is an exceedance that we experienced. We experienced an exceedance in dewatering our wastewater lagoon system. So for those that don't know, predominantly when we're here talking about our interim water treatment system, we are talking about surface waters. We're talking about storm water, right? That's what ends up in Rec Pond. On the base, we also have an industrial waste conveyance system from the drains in our hangars that goes to industrial waste lagoons through an oil water separator. And then that water sits there until it can be assessed and treated before it's discharged to the town of New Windsor Sanitary Department for eventual final treatment before it gets sent out from the town of New Windsor. So we have an agreement with the town of Windsor, of New Windsor for 10 parts per trillion of PFAS, before we discharge to them. So we pre-treat at the base. And normally when we discharge our wastewater lagoons, we're doing this in the fall and in the spring to avoid winter dewatering. Well, as all us residents of Orange County here know, we've had an exceptional winter. And by the time we got to the end of December, we had almost overtopped both of our wastewater lagoons, which together combined hold almost a million gallons of water. We had dewatered them to zero just before Thanksgiving. And then by the end of December, we were already almost overtopping again. So we began dewatering as per our protocols with the town of New Windsor and through our contractor. We were dewatering. The initial discharge was 6 parts per trillion. And as part of our protocol, we get permission from New Windsor to discharge to their sanitary system, and then we pull samples. I believe it's every 48 hours as we are discharging to New Windsor. And normally, we don't get any exceedances from the initial draw. This time, 2 days after, and unfortunately, it takes 2 days for testing. 2 days after testing, it came back that we had exceedances at 12 parts per trillion and 17 parts per trillion that we were discharging to New Windsor. By the time we got our results back, we had already completed discharging all of Lagoon A. So we were no longer discharging, but we had noted an exceedance. We reported immediately to the town of New Windsor. We reported to Mr. Lawson and the RAB board. And we are working with New Windsor now on protocols for avoiding this from happening again. We're talking about adding a third stage to our industrial wastewater lagoon system. But I just want to again emphasize, we are not talking about the interim system that Bristol operates for Rec Pond. We are talking about our industrial waste system. So right now, Lagoon A is empty. Should be able to get us through the rest of the winter, and we're going to kind of reassess, put out different protocols, work with the town of New Windsor to get back to where we can begin discharging for Lagoon B. So I just wanted to kind of walk everybody through that. I know members of the RAB board have probably seen the email from Mr. Lawson, but I just wanted to kind of, for the sake of the public members who are here and online, kind of explain, kind of the events that have transpired on the base since the last RAB meeting. Any questions?
Thank you, Colonel. I
have a
will
question.
allow a few questions from RAB members right now because we did cover some technical topics there. All of these, hopefully you did receive notification about. Before you speak again, I'm going to call on Kyle in just a second, but I want to remind people to also introduce themselves when they're speaking. It helps with our meeting minutes, and it especially helps the people who are online. I think they knew who you were, Colonel, but that's okay. So just a reminder. Kyle, go ahead with the question.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Kyle Conway. In regards to the accidental discharge, what protections are you providing the military personnel who are cleaning up the residual foam?
Yeah, so in case anybody in the back didn't hear, what protections are we providing for military members who are participating in the cleanup? So again, this was not a full discharge of foam. I'm sure you've all YouTubed what a foam discharge looks like. It's literally raining foam, and it fills the room very quickly. It's very dangerous. This was water that had some residual foam substance in it. Again, HEF, high expansion foam, does not contain, as far as we know, the PFAS contaminants that we are concerned with, or that the EPA is concerned with, PFOS, PFOA, right? But for those members who were participating in the cleanup, they used, gloves and squeegees. I myself was on the ground, with the firefighters who responded, and predominantly it was soapy water, right? It was not a full discharge where they were waist deep in foam, as you may have seen on YouTube or something like that.
So it doesn't present any significant health
Not that we're
concerns.
aware of. Not that we're aware of.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. You were saying that sorry, Jack Caldwell, of Passaic Creek. Okay. Was going through the sanitary system. Does that mean it's taken from the Air National Guard site to the treatment plant in New Windsor in pipes?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with the wells that are near that treatment plant
Which treatment plants?
in New Windsor? The wells are near that treatment plant. I
The
was just wondering
Butterhill
if that,
Sorry, John Clark. Are you talking about the Butterhill wells?
yeah,
So I think the question is the transportation from the base to the wastewater treatment, is that wastewater treatment near the Butterhill wells in New Windsor?
I'll take the, thank you. No, not at all. So when we discharge into the town of New Windsor sanitary system, just like the rest of our wastewater, right? That goes into the sanitary system right there at the manhole that we feed.
eventually that sanitary system that dumps into the Moonhead?
Yes. After the town of New Windsor's treatment,
Yeah.
right? I think they treat to tertiary standards and then dump. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yes, this is Dan from Riverkeeper. So this is under the Clean Water Act, the local sewer system has the authority and responsibility to regulate industrial discharges to the public sewer system. So in this case, New Windsor has, back in 2018, 2019 or so, when this, maybe even earlier, when this came to light, they had previous incidents when the whole plant was foaming 10, 20 feet high. I've seen pictures of it. Then they said, okay, Air National Guard, we are using our local sewer authority to say, you can only give us 10 parts per trillion of these two regulated PFAS. And so what I think we heard is that there were exceedances of that limit that the local sewer has put on. So the pretreatment treats the waste from the lagoons at the base, then it goes to the sewage treatment plant, which obviously is not designed to treat PFAS, designed to treat sewage, but then it passes through there at the regulated limit.
Correct.
right?
Thank you, Dan.
We can ask a couple more questions, but so there's a difference between environmental issues on the base and the environmental restoration program, which is what the RAB is formed to discuss. And so I do want to, obviously we send you emails, and I do want to let there be a little bit more conversation, but we will move on in a minute. Let's go ahead with Bill online. And hopefully we can hear him enough to repeat.
Hi, this is Bill Fetter. Two items. One, I believe the wastewater treatment plant in New Windsor is down gradient of the Butterhill wells. My question is, can we assume that the whole 1 million gallons was discharged before any corrective action was taken from the lagoons? Thank you.
I don't know. Thank you.
So it's a very good question. We did not discharge. Let's go ahead.
Okay.
Per our protocols with the town of New Windsor, we do not discharge both lagoons under the initial testing. And so we discharged all of Lagoon A, so that was about approximately 500,000 gallons. The other lagoon is still full. And this is very non-standard for us. We usually, again, discharge in the fall and in the spring. We usually can survive the whole winter without having to do this again. But again, as anybody who lives here knows, it has been an exceptionally wet winter. And so we were forced to dewater or overtop in December, which is a time when we're not normally discharging. So that's the amount of water that went through. Again, you know, we only have 3 sample points within the discharge of that 500,000 gallons. And so we know that 2 of the 4 were exceedances from that time.
Jennifer Rollison, the Brooklyn Water Project. I just maybe want to point out, just because this is also being documented and people are, you know, zooming in and such, from communities that are affected. And so, you know, when you talk about things being released and wastewater versus drinking water sources, all of that can be confusing. It might be helpful to have either had New Windsor, have anyone in the room to speak to either give assurances that drinking water wasn't affected. It would probably not expand all of the discussion that's going on. I think what we're trying to ask is just to make sure that homes are not affected, people aren't affected in this process. So just for future reference, if there's any other incidences like this, if we can have something fully, you know, prepared to answer those kind of concerns would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Ms. Rollison. It is an important point. We are talking about discharge to a sanitary system, not anything that would or that we would knowingly would affect freshwater aquifers.
We can keep our eye on that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, everybody. So those were reminders and updates. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Sorry, Chuck. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. It's Chuck Thomas, Conservation Advisory Council, City of Newburgh. My question is, I went back to look at some of the previous recordings, and I couldn't find any recordings past like January of last year.
We're going to discuss that in just a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a reminder of upcoming meeting dates. Again, they are the last Wednesday of each month, except the one in, is that the last? Maybe, I forget whether it's the last or the third. Tell me. The one in January, we always bump a little bit, but these are the upcoming meeting dates for your calendar. Next slide, please. I would like to hear a little bit of feedback. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we did have, you know, pretty big poster board session in October. We had about 25 to 30 public attendees. It's a little bit hard to tell exactly who was public from the sign-in sheets, but and so if we could entertain just a couple minutes about, first of all, what you thought went well and that you liked about it, and then what we could learn from it to improve for next time. And there has been a request to have poster board sessions again in the future. So I'm going to open it up for just a few minutes of discussion, starting with Jennifer.
Jennifer again. So I would just like to thank you for at least holding the poster board. I think any opportunities for the public to engage with all of us, and especially you guys, to answer questions and have them answered directly is great. Overall, we could always, I still think it could be in a simpler format. I'm sorry, but I just felt like I was back in college and it was a little hard at times, and I'm attending all of these meetings. And if there was a way to, and you know, you guys always have such snazzy packets. So if there's a way for people to walk away from each of those areas with everything in hand that they've looked at, so that there's reference for later, that would be great.
I think there were handouts in
Yeah, for I believe you, but some stuff wasn't.
the other agencies that participated were asked to bring handouts, but we had no control over whether they did or not. So we'll take that as a note for next time to make to try to emphasize that.
And I know time was hard, but I do believe people were still trying to get, everyone's coming off of work and stuff, so availability was a little difficult, but I dare to say maybe add a little bit more time or separate it from the actual RAB meeting itself. I don't know how that's feasible, but I think we had a very good turnout, and if people have questions, they should get them answered.
Thank you, Jennifer. John Clark?
So John Clark, community member. I thought that the time was extremely valuable, and it was an opportunity to talk to some of the folks in this room that we really don't have a lot of opportunity to converse in this format. And so it created an opportunity to ask casual questions, just, little curiosities to help interpret the very data-rich presentations. I too felt like I was back in college. There's a lot to process here, and especially when the interactions that I have in the community are, hey, do I need to worry about my drinking water? It doesn't get any more technical than that. Oh, I bought a house in a neighborhood that's right next to the polluted wells. What? It's invaluable to have that time that we can just chat and learn, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Dan?
Riverkeeper. Yeah, I echo both of those. I thought it was as valuable for RAB members as the public. And I would just reiterate, I think that the feedback that we already brought and were bringing last year was just that we didn't have the details of the meeting early enough to really effectively promote. So I feel like that 25 to 30 could be 3, 4, 5 times as much if we had that. So even today, if we could say the October 23rd, 2024 meeting is going to be that meeting, it's going to be 5 to 7 here, we can start getting the word out now, and make sure that the public really understands the opportunity that you are presenting with the poster board session. Because we as a, community RAB members have talked frequently, like, should we be getting people to come here tonight? And we always kind of say, it's so we're so in the weeds here, and we need that space to be a little weedy. It's a hard entry point for the public, whereas the poster session is a better entry point. So we'd hope to build on it next year. And I think that would be, the request I'd make, is to get those details now, as soon as possible, so we can go ahead and build a room.
Thanks, Dan. And just for clarification, Dan is proposing that if we knew the meeting was going to be this time in this place in October, we could promote it now. But I just want to be clear that it is not scheduled as of right now. So no miscommunication there. Okay, thank you, team. I appreciate. Oh, sorry, go ahead. We're gonna, so anybody from the public, please type your comments into the question and answer period, or question and answer part of the meeting. Kyle, go ahead, please.
Kyle Conway, community member. I think it was a great attempt to bridge the gap between an institution and the community. Usually the community doesn't feel like institutions are supportive or considerate of them. So to reiterate what Dan said, I think it makes sense for such an event, but it could be, you can expound the efforts and even make it less daunting for people to participate and understand the efforts that are being done to make sure people are safe and their future is healthy.
Thank you, Kyle. Jen Benson.
Jen Benson, Hudson River Sloop, Clearwater. I agree. I want to echo what Kyle said. I think that it was a much more accessible format than I've seen at past RAB meetings, which was really valuable. And I also think, and I want to also thank all of the folks who are standing by poster boards, because I think that within the conversation, there was also a really concerted effort to try to explain things clearly and try to really break things down for folks. That being said, I think we can even go further next year And maybe even have just like a big, like, what happened? How did we get here? And have those as like introductory, kind of like pre the posters that we had of like, all right, you know, something happened in 2016, but how did we actually come from there to now? I think would be some good additional context for the community. And then we're going to get into this in a little bit. But just as a preview, I think that there are some opportunities to leverage like the website and the email list and some other resources that the RAB has developed, but maybe not deployed as fully. That I'm curious and excited to learn what happens on presentation slide number 15 regarding.
Well, we better move on then because we're already at the end of our RAB business part of the meeting, which was supposed to end at 6:20. So we better move on to slide 15. Yes, Chuck?
Thomas, CAC, the poster boards were terrific. Is there any way they can be scanned and available electronically so we can blow them up and look at little sections and study them in detail? Thank you.
Yes. The short answer is for all of the ones developed by the National Guard Bureau and their contractors, for sure, yes. For those developed by other agencies, maybe. We did send those out, but we can post them, which will get on to our next slide. Okay, so RAB discussion topics. There's a lot on here, and you all have sent me a lot of information about how you want to be running the RAB differently, better, make some changes. We're not going to be able to have an extended discussion about this tonight in the interest of time, but I do want to address the questions that we were asked, and we'll spend a little bit of time on it, okay? The first has to do with RAB membership and some discussion about RAB members who have not been, we haven't seen here in a while or online. First of all, I just want you to be aware we don't have perfect attendance lists especially because online things appear as like call-in user 4, and we don't know who those people are. Hopefully, if they are RAB members, they have let us know that they're online, but I wanted to make that clear. That said, we do have some RAB membership going back. First of all, I apologize that your handouts were printed before we updated the slide that lists the RAB members. I know that I was reminded that Mark Sanchez Potter has resigned. I believe I was told tonight that Robert Browning also did resign. Okay. And that leaves 4 members, and I don't know if anybody knows them and can reach out to them. We have 4 members who we have not seen here in a while. That's Carla Johnson, Ora Lopez Zarat, Laura Garcia, and Ramona Burton. Now, the RAB operating procedures say that if you don't attend 3 meetings in a row without sending news saying why you can't be here or sending somebody in your alternate, you can be removed. And so I'd actually like to propose that I at least send these folks an email message to say, I'm sorry we haven't seen you participating in RAB meetings for a while, and give them a deadline like next week, like not a long period. But if we don't hear from you by this date, we will assume you no longer want to participate in the RAB. I feel like it's just sort of polite to, before we just axe them off the list. Are people okay with that proposal? Jennifer?
My only comment to that is that you have assured us that in the past you have reached out to those and not received any response. Therefore, I feel that already laid the groundwork in matching with what's in the written steps.
We have emailed them before and not received a response, and I know Chuck Thomas has been trying to reach people as well.
Yes, and others, yeah. So,
but those emails didn't flat out say if you don't reply by this date, you will be removed from RAB membership. Chuck?
I asked Robert Browning if he could send a letter, and what I heard from him is he had triple bypass surgery. That was his answer. So I think
it's a pretty good excuse. Okay. Okay, so if it's okay with you, I will send them an email with a short deadline that is not focused on you must reply, but focused on if we don't hear from you, you will be removed. So lack of reply to this email will mean you're off. Okay. And then also just as a reminder, we have rolling, we did decide to have rolling membership. The application is available on the base website. And so that new membership applications can be submitted at any time.
Suggest that in addition to stating, giving a timeline, that you can also, if you wish to add to your email, if they wish to return, they can always reapply at a later date.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. The Air National Guard website. So obviously this is maintained by the base. It is their public outreach forum for the base and Air National Guard issues at Stewart. However, I have talked to them and we have agreement that we can basically post anything that we have available for the RAB already. So I can put a copy of the presentation slides. I can put a copy of the poster boards. I just have to send these to Public Affairs and they will post them. They can post a copy of the link to YouTube, those kinds of things. So anything we already have prepared for the RAB that is public information can be posted to the Air National Guard website. So there was also a request in there for fact sheets and other things like that that are not under scope or contract to prepare at this time. And so developing new materials to put on the website is not something that can go forward at this time because there's no contract mechanism to have those types of things prepared. Yes, John.
John Clark, question. So we can put it on the website or we will put it on the website? I'm confused.
We will.
We will. All right.
I
That's
had
awesome.
to first find out if we can.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, we can. So if everybody's happy with that, then the answer now is we will. I will forward things to Public Affairs and they will put them on there.
Cool. Thanks.
Jen Benson, Hudson River Soup Clearwater. Would it also be possible to post the meeting information as well on that website?
Sure.
Okay. That's what I do on my own version of kind of this page, and it's actually very helpful for people to have. Thank you.
Absolutely. So questions about recording and broadcasting of these meetings. So we do a, we turn on the recording basically on WebEx, as we've told you. I then send that link, not always in a timely fashion, I will admit, but I send those to public, and that's going to change, just so you know. But I send those to Public Affairs, and they put that on YouTube. There was a glitch for both the April and July meetings, and we do not have those recordings. April was our first hybrid meeting, and we simply didn't press the record button. I will admit that. In July, there was a WebEx glitch. We now know how to work around that, and we know what happened so that we can avoid it in the future. So both April and July do not have videos or recordings available. So I apologize for those. In terms of ones going farther back, I honestly, once they go on YouTube, I send them to Dan or to Public Affairs. I don't actually go back on YouTube to watch them myself. I don't need to see myself on YouTube. So I have not actually gone back to see if there are ones from the past that are missing. If you tell me that there is one missing from a certain date, I can check to see whether we have that recording. So I can check into that. There was a question about whether those of you, people in the room, can record the meeting. And the answer to that is it's a public meeting. If you want to run a video camera or a phone or something during the meeting, that's fine. It is a public meeting. We just ask that if, however you use that recording, you use it responsibly and don't take things out of context or that kind of thing. You know, this is a cooperative kind of group. Hopefully everyone would honor that kind of thing. Email distribution list. I think there have been questions about, and we've talked about this before, about notifying the community about these meetings. I have an extensive email distribution list that we've developed over time. People who signed in at the poster board session who wanted to be added to it have been added to it. You don't see it because they get a blind copy of the emails that are sent to you. I cannot provide that list to you because that's, once they sign up onto it, that's kind of private information. I can't send you that email list. If you think somebody should be on it, or you want me to check if somebody is on it, you can let me know that. But I can't share that email distribution list with you. Okay? Chuck.
CAC, quickly back to the ANG website.
Yes.
Oops, I just lost it. Anyway, there's a main menu and it says about us, news. What section would it be?
It's under the environmental page. No, that's okay.
On my phone.
Yeah. I know it's on the environmental page.
Don't see an environmental page.
The only way that I have managed to figure out that page as a non-tech savvy millennial is I Google Stewart Air National Guard Base and the word environment, and then it comes up. So
sorry about that. I think the structure of Air National Guard base websites are standardized, so we have no control over that. Jennifer?
I was actually going to ask, not to take offense for my question coming up, but do you refer to other websites prior to creating a new basis? I only ask because, for instance, I found a really nice snazzy one. Granted, it's the Navy. I don't know how you feel about them, but it's pretty nicely laid out. I'd be happy to share it with you, but it has all of the RAB meetings. It has the applications if you're interested to apply. It's really laid out in a way that is easy to maneuver through, to navigate, and to engage. So it just seems that since this is an ongoing issue, obviously, there's many bases, many types of, and all of that, that if something's working really well, maybe we should try to emulate it or take from it what you can. And
the Air National Guard base website is operated by the Air National Guard base, and I think it is structured the same as all Air National Guard bases. Now, I can take it back to Public Affairs to see if they have any ability to alter how they put things on a particular page. I can check with them on that, but in terms of restructuring the page, I doubt that is something they'll be able to do. I'm just taking a guess.
Well, sure.
But I'll certainly I'll follow up with the Public Affairs.
Their page is community outreach as opposed to environmental. It's how they view what the purpose of that page is, just that alone, community outreach versus, the idea of like, well, it's environmental stuff, we'll put it here. So, just something to think
Okay,
about.
we'll follow up with Public Affairs. Jen?
I pulled it up. I look at it occasionally, but it doesn't actually say that the Restoration Advisory Board has anything to do with PFAS, and then you don't really hit PFAS until halfway down. So perhaps as we start to, as this page is revisioned, it might be good to like thread the needle and connect the Restoration Advisory Board to the PFAS contamination in some like plain language, but we can always have a separate meeting about it.
Okay.
And John Clark, so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is related to some of the other bullet points here, right? Right, promotional language, right? Like that, to your point, Jennifer, about how they view the function of it, so.
Okay, so let me move on to those. In terms of meeting promotion, the way that we promote, we advertise the meeting in 3 different newspapers, 1 to 2 times for 1 to 2 weeks before the meeting. That's under our scope of work, how we do that. And then we also send you the flyer in both English and Spanish and ask for RAB members to share that however you would like. And you're welcome to share that information on your own social media or within your organizations or networks, however you like. That is the meeting promotion we do. In terms of the promotional language, I did for this last ad, and I unfortunately don't have it in front of me. I can't add a lot of language that will change the size of the ad and therefore change the cost of the ad. But I did add some language that said, I'm paraphrasing, but the Restoration Advisory Board discusses Contamination from past environmental practices, including, and I spelled out PFAS. So including the use of, it may have said firefighting foam or contaminants from firefighting foam and reference PFAS. So I tried to add a phrase to provide a little bit more information within the space limitation that I had. Jack Caldwell.
Yeah, Jack Caldwell. As far as the language is concerned, I was wondering if other words can be changed or you can work that phrase so that words like invitation, participation to the public, so they can understand that if they come to this, they're being invited to come, invited to participate. And Washington Lake wasn't mentioned in there. I don't recall.
We do not mention Washington Lake now.
And there was
It does say the public at least is welcome to attend. It may not say invited. I could check what the language is on that. But no, it does not refer to Washington Lake.
and that this is a
in particular.
hybrid meeting.
It does say that this is a hybrid meeting and
It did not.
it should have provided the location and the link.
Jen Benson, Hudson River Sub Clearwater, it said, whatever the title is, Stewart Air National Guard Base Restoration Advisory Board meeting, Restoration Advisory Board virtual meeting, and then had the address and the Zoom.
It's right here.
Okay.
So I think it would be helpful, I think it would be helpful to just say virtual and in person.
Yeah,
a little
absolutely.
bit more
And
clear.
that sounds like
Person and online, but
one of those instances where I didn't read the title and read the details. So I apologize. Dan and then Kyle.
One other thing on meeting promotion is that when you send the email with the link,
Mhm.
it's an image and it's a linked image. So if you get that very thing, you can click on it, I assume, and get into the meeting, but it's very hard to share it or to put it like Riverkeeper, for instance, we have event page. We could create an event for this and promote it, but I would have to type out 96532E8A8.
You can't copy the text box in the
No,
email.
if you see you share it as an image. So it's this block,
Oh, I know what it looks like.
like that's an,
PDF, but not out of JPEG or.
No, it comes directly from WebEx. You click on share
uh-huh.
and that's what it gives me.
If you can look for a
So
way to
I'll look
create
at
a
another
copy,
way. It wasn't,
paste version to
yeah, I
that,
wasn't aware that you couldn't share that easily. I'll look into that.
it just would.
Yeah,
make it easy.
specifically within WebEx, there's a place for me to share and then it gives me that information.
Thanks.
So I'll check on that. Kyle, did you have anything else?
Kyle Conway. What is the audience you're looking to attract? Is there a number you'd like to see in this room?
No. This
The more the merrier?
RAB meetings are a group of interested community members like you all are, obviously. That number can be anywhere from a minimum of about 4. I have to about 20 is about, which is actually, this group is about one of the largest RABs that I facilitate.
I meant
Community
community.
can be 0 to 100. There is no set number of people, or the meetings are open to the public, but they are meetings of the Restoration Advisory Board to discuss environmental restoration, which focuses on contamination from past practices at the base.
The reason I ask is because you've said you advertise in 2 newspapers. Which 2 newspapers are there?
The Hudson Valley Press, wait. There's 3 of them. Mid-Hudson Times, Hudson Valley Press, not the Sentinel,
Times Herald.
Times Herald,
Um,
Times Herald Record.
So, and that's also digital. On their digital platforms, the advertisement goes out as well. It's not just paper. Is there a cap on your budget in terms of advertising? Because I'm saying this because information is really moving, really swift these days. And
Right.
have you advertised on K104? Have you utilized radio? Have you utilized some type of billboard? I mean,
So all of those types of things are great ideas. I have to, as a contractor, I have to operate within my scope of work from the Air National Guard. And all of those things are outside of our scope of work. So we can't do all those additional things.
What is scope of work? I mean, because I'm thinking
Scope
about advertising.
is the work that the Air National Guard has described that they want us to provide. So now that said, I can tell you that there will be a new contract coming out for this work. And Bill is working with contracting folks on an updated scope of work, which we'll get into talking about the community involvement plan revision and future poster board sessions. So he's working with contracting on a new scope of work. And so whatever he is able to get in that, and there are funding limitations obviously as well. But whatever gets written into that is what the contractor is hired to do.
And sorry,
John.
John Clark. So this is a little out of characteristic for me, and so I apologize. And but I'm a little bit passionate, you know, in thinking about environmental justice and people who are in the dark continually get left behind because they're not involved. They don't know. And I don't know anybody that reads the newspaper.
I know.
So I understand what scope of work is. I understand government contracting. We're failing. We are not reaching the target audience. And we're leaving behind a community who is continually traumatized by the after effects of health and financial burden and our continued utility system. Right? This is very real for our community, and I'm not attacking anyone here. This is very real, and we're failing at reaching them.
I appreciate those comments, John. And I can tell you that the government advertises in newspapers because CERCLA was written before the internet. And so there are certain things that went into the CERCLA process that say thou must advertise in newspapers. So we have to. Can we do more? Can we do things differently? That's something that could be considered for future scopes of work potentially. But that's where we also, I can tell you, we coordinated with a person here at the Armory that coordinates with other people in the Spanish language community, and she asked to be added to our email list, and so she gets notifications, that kind of thing. Whether she shares them, I don't know. Does anybody know if this is a problem, the siren? When I hear a siren, I just want to make sure that we're not supposed to be doing anything. Okay. But also, John, I really appreciate your comments, and you are not wrong. And that's where we also need, to the extent, and that's a Restoration Advisory Board is supposed to represent a cross-section of the community, and to the extent that you in your role as a community liaison, a two-way community liaison, are able to help spread that information, we do rely on the RAB to help get that information out as well. Jen.
I have kind of an in the weeds question, but as Dan said, sometimes that's why we're here. So the question is the community involvement plan shaped by your scope of work and said limitations that exist within that, or is it the other way where the community involvement plan is an opportunity to shape the scope of work that could then open, just to try to understand the process? I'm reading Bill's face as
Yep. Bill?
For those of you online,
Right up my alley.
Myra is nodding.
I'm just listening. Okay, Bill Meyer, Restoration Program Manager. I'll stand in the middle here so you can all hear me. I'll care. So the community involvement plan, when we went out with it, it was out for public comment. Everyone participated in that. That kind of shapes, can shape what's, the Restoration Advisory Board. So if our outreach isn't, basically, the CIP asks, how do we communicate? How does the public want to be communicated with? Do you want radio advertisement? Do you want, public meetings? Or do you want just a letter or an email? They look at all those different aspects of that, and that basically kind of shapes and forms what we put into the Restoration Advisory Board. Well, they we started this, was it the RAC, I guess, Restoration Advisory Committee. We did the RAC, and it was based upon the input that came, because the community involvement plan was finalized in 2019, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah, 2019. So now, fast forward, we've been operating for 4+ years. 2019, it's 2024. So now, it's time for an upgrade, hence the bullet CIP revision. These are living, breathing documents for the commander, for the base, how we're going to communicate restoration activities. So, if it's not working right now, we can definitely change it. And so this input that we get from you all will help us shape and develop what that. So I'm working with folks back at the Air National Guard headquarters that's developing the scope of work, what that restoration advisory board support should look like. So I can take that back and we can feed it in, to do some other things outside of, well, CERCLA says just use newspaper ads. And I always thought that was kind of silly. Because, when we did the relative risk site evaluation, we actually had someone come speak about it, because sometimes we send stuff out there and we just put it in the newspaper and like, well, what's an RSC? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on it. So the more, we can do, outreach wise, we'll taking notes from this. So when we actually develop that scope of work, we can do some other things that are outside of the box. There's nothing that says we can't do radio advertising. I don't have this unlimited budget, but we're going to come up with a cost estimate and elements of work that needs to be provided to support execution of this restoration advisory board. And, we'll take it from there, but it's good to hear, it's good input to get. So, okay.
Can I just ask, building on that, so timeline, or how does the RAB beyond these couple of comments that you're getting here, where can we, make sure we don't miss the boat and you go and make your proposal and we didn't get all the kind of conversation in on a CIP revision?
Well, believe me, the comments that you give me, I don't want to come back here again and hear, well, how come you didn't do this? So I'm going to take it under advisement to make sure that we do these things. So, and that's the purpose of these meetings. It's kind of like a sounding board for if something's not going right, we can do it. Amy's already under a set of, her scope is spelled out because it was like 4 years ago. So now we're getting ready to renew it so we can update this. So, okay. Go ahead, and then I'll get to you. Oh,
I'm just going to ask another in the weeds question, and then Kyle will probably ask something that makes more sense. What's the timeline for the renewal?
it's going to be renewed before the end of 30 September of this year. So it's going out for contract this year.
So that would be
The new fiscal year starts 1 October. So when we're putting money down to obligate for this year, it has to be under contract, ready to go for the beginning of the fiscal year.
So that means that we have functionally, we have two restoration advisory boards before
Well, yeah,
the
but
renewal.
if we're writing the scope right now, now's this great timing for it. So
One more question. Do we have, you're taking this feedback
Mhm.
that we're providing right now?
Yeah, I'm going to see the scope of work. They're going to bounce it past me. Is this what you need? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I
So we
need
Don't
more.
necessarily need to rush through revising the community
No,
involvement.
that's a separate component.
Good to do it.
The RAB contract is separate from the CIP. Restoration Advisory Board, Amy's company supports facilitation of this effort. They also did the CIP, this upcoming effort. They're two separate efforts. There's going to be a community involvement revision, CIP revision, and then there's going to be a Restoration Advisory Board tract.
Thank you.
At least that's my understanding right now. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Kyle had one more. Yeah.
Actually, you can address that, and then I have just one comment to say. Maybe you might capture what I was thinking. So you can go ahead. I'll ask afterwards.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So Yeah, future poster board sessions. I mean, yeah, they're definitely going to be part of the next upcoming, RAB support contract that we have. I guess it's up to you all as a body, if you want it in October, now's the time to voice if that's what you want. Last year we proposed it in July and then we shifted it to October because we didn't think we were going to get enough active participation to do it. So if that's what the RAB, you all want to vote on that and say, hey, we want to do October, I have no issues. So, okay. But, work with, I don't know how you want to do this, Amy, if they.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to say that they would like.
Okay. All right. So we'll just. No, there you go. Yeah, answer your own question.
So
Yep. And we've done it differently, like at other bases. I know at Biddle in Pennsylvania, the RAB co-chair basically said, instead of us getting, PowerPoint slides and all this, let's just do a poster board session for one of our RAB meetings. And that's all we focus on. But if you guys want the double dose of the poster board session and the presentations, we can do that too. We're flexible. Okay. So, okay.
So I appreciate the future poster board sessions and the future attempt to engage the community. The only thing I was going to say is, what the people need is, the community needs is a genuine effort, and it needs to be translated. Sometimes we don't need anything that's we don't need symbolism. We need something tangible, and you can utilize the RAB. And if you had, I'm pretty sure this would fit in the budget if you were to walk with me in the community and say, hey, you've been impacted. We need to help. We want to understand. We want to contribute to your growth and your health. And I'm pretty sure walking feet will be cheaper than radio advertisements, So I would definitely say it's not saying that your efforts aren't genuine or that you don't care, but some things are always lost and some things can be lost in translation. So when we're renewing the policy, and policy impacts behavior, policy impacts people's experiences. When you reform your revision, you got to re-engage the community differently.
Yep.
So let the people feel that it's genuine, because this is not, obviously we know this goes on and on throughout the country. So let Newburgh be a different experience.
Okay.
That's what I meant, genuine. Let it feel genuine. And then the outcome might be different with the participation from the community.
Yep. And that's why we allow, when we put this together, for folks to look at it, if there's different ideas and that's, you all have an opportunity when we put that together, because really the CIP is the commander's tool to do the outreach, that two-way communication. So, that's where I would recommend. I mean, I hear what you're saying and storing it up here, but when it comes out for comment, those are the kind of things that we need to do, get your all's input on. So if that's something that's important, or if you got an idea, hey, when you're doing the CIP outreach, instead of doing the surveys or the phone calls, why don't you do X, whatever X is. So, but we need to hear that from the community as well as the RAB, because you're going to have an opportunity to provide that input. It's not just, Bill Meyer. I'm not the subject matter expert on community involvement, but if you guys got ideas, that's where you engage and provide us what those ideas are, so we can capture that, support it. And I'm doing this nationwide, so for all my bases.
I'd like to just kind of emphasize, because when you're talking about, getting the feedback, this is sort of the example you gave a while ago, which was 100 responses or 200 responses out of 1,000, correct?
Out of 10,000.
10,000. So that there tells you maybe there's more information from the lack of, it's where it's absent, that is telling you something more than the 200 out of the 10,000. So I'm asking or challenging to kind of also look, we like to gather data, but it's oftentimes what's missing that'll tell you more. Because really 200 out of a 10,000.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of why we were like,
Mhm.
I can tell you that 100 or 200 responses for community involvement, community involvement plans are, they're based on, they're subjective data, not statistical data. The EPA guidance on input for a community involvement plan is to get at least 25 people in a community. So we're not looking for 10,000. Now, if 10,000 people want to provide input, that's fantastic. And that's absolutely great. But I just want your next community involvement plan contractor will hopefully explain, maybe present at a RAB how they go about doing this. But I don't want you to mistake that 100 out of 10,000 is a low response. Now, that said, the question is, how about all the other people who didn't respond? And would they have had different input? Entirely possible.
Well, I just also think the city of Newburgh is almost 30,000, and then we have our expanded New Windsor and town folks who were impacted. So when you already start with just 10,000, and I get it, I'm not data analytical, or, anything like that, but I'm just saying, please don't just take information that's loudest and make that where you focus or feel you've had success, because then it won't actually, it'll reflect in how things
was done is that postcards that were in both English and Spanish were sent to roughly 1 in every 4 homes. In those 3. Card that said, yeah, get into different information on the card, why you should participate, all those kinds of things. Absolutely, and that's something you can look at for the next time you do.
yeah, I got the message. It's like doing marketing for a business. If you want more customers, how are we going to get more customers? So,
well, I'm
I
not
mean, if
very.
I was getting paid by the customer, I definitely, so kind of the same approach. If you're trying to do better outreach to folks like for participation and sharing information, the
Yeah.
higher you get, the better off you are.
Well, I mean, also just, postcard or whatever in the mail, I throw out my coal bucks every month because I just don't see them half the time. So I'm just saying otherwise.
I'm going to move on from here. We're 40 minutes behind schedule and we haven't gotten into any of the technical topics yet. So I apologize if you have more input on this. There is we asked people at the end of the meeting if you have other questions or things like that to send them to Dan by a date and he can let us know if you have other questions. So I apologize, but we're going to move on because we're only as far as RAB business. So I'm going to move on from here and go to the environmental updates, which start with you, Bill. There you go. So sorry, I do appreciate this input, but I also want to make sure we get to other parts of the presentation.
Okay. Bill Meyer, Restoration Program Manager, Air National Guard. I'm not really going to talk a lot about this. This is just the CERCLA process and estimated, years when things start. Roger. Okay. Roger that. Yeah. I'll stand in the middle. Use my command voice. There you go. All right. Well, they got a screen too, so you can all see this. So basically, we're in the RI phase for PFAS out here. We're looking at potentially doing some interim actions. There's another IRP site. It's a former landfill. We've been doing annual monitoring on that for 25 plus years. Next slide. Right. Yeah, all restoration. If you had a fuel spill, everything's covered under it. It's not everyone thinks it's just PFAS. Typically, PFAS is the only thing that's going on, but yeah. Oh, We're still open. We're monitoring every year. Or a contractor comes out and samples and does soil gas, methane, everything, because it's a capped landfill. Yep, all that. Okay, timeline for PFAS, just another overview. We updated it. We're in 2024, so we're continuing the RI field work and the operation of the interim stormwater treatment system. Next slide. Okay, so in 14 November, I personally got a letter from Senator Schumer, Gillibrand, and Representative Ryan that asks a bunch of questions about, what's going on with the PFAS investigation, and they identified some issues. So what I did was just provide an overview of the Air Guard response back to that. I wasn't going to give you the whole letter. So the director of the Air National Guard on 4 January responded to the New York Codell. These are the key components of what they put in the response. So one of them was, to date, Air National Guard spent $23.8 million on PFAS action. So that's everything from the site investigation, the preliminary assessment, the RI, the interim stormwater treatment system, all that combined, $23.8 million. And every year we spend about $3.5 million annually on that interim stormwater treatment system, treating the water at Wreck Pond. Second bullet, they asked us about, when are we going to do design changes to increase the capacity for the interim stormwater treatment system? And we basically, we talked about this already, and some of this will become even more clear later this evening, if I can get to it, is, right now that 17K project, that final volume is kind of critical as to what we design that to. Do we do 100,000 gallons per minute, to cover the surges? Probably not going to do that. But I think we need to look at, what that final diversion is going to be, that final volume, whatever the number is, before we do any system design changes, because we may need to increase it, or we may not need to increase it as much. There's some questions out there that we're going to have answers to. Third bullet talked about the considering evaluating interim actions to mitigate PFAS, groundwater infiltration to the stormwater lines below the water table. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. There's some efforts going on. Actually, I have a figure once we get to the end of when Walt's talking about the sampling update. We have a figure that shows where the water table, where the stormwater lines are with respect to, are they above the water table or below? Are they degraded? There's a great visual that we'll get to. So, but the answer to that was yes, we're evaluating the slip lining, the repair of the stormwater lines, as well as other interim actions out there that we can do. Because under CERCLA, you can do an interim action at any point in the process. I mean, we could have done an interim action during the SI, technically, if we kind of sort of did with the interim stormwater treatment system-ish. But the answer to that was, yes, we're going to evaluate that, and we're looking at these. And I've got some updates tonight. There's some other efforts going on that's going to help us get to the answer so we can program money to do what we need to do. Last bullet talked about the second field investigation effort. They asked, well, because they, we said, basically responded back, once we get more data, if there's other areas that we can do interim actions at, if it's not groundwater, maybe soil, we'll look at that. But we're going to get a whole lot more information when AECOM actually gets back out into the field to collect that next level of information, the second field mobilization. We got all the data back. Based upon all the data that we've got back, there's a couple things that we're looking at. And we'll talk a little bit later about that. So that's it for what the letter said, pretty much. I just kind of summarized it up. Yes. Yep. Yep. All right. Next slide. Hi, I'm Bill Meyer again. No, just kidding. All right. So here's some of the new activities that just kind of came up over while we were out the last time. So there's a AFCAC, the Air Force Center for Engineering. They've got a PFAS fingerprinting and background study contract out there. It's with Oneida Sustainment and Restoration Services. They're partnered with Patel. They're actually looking at doing some PFAS fingerprinting and then background. So what levels of PFAS are in the background, not actually on the base from, an obvious release. They are going to be able to come out in April. I'm trying to get them out here to give an update to the RAB on, what their effort is. So their project objectives, you can see here is the fingerprint study to discriminate amongst different potential AFFF sources. And then the background study, to look at anthropogenic background concentrations. So offsite. Second effort is another one. This is from this critical path analysis. Miss Nancy Balkus, she's the Secretary of the Air Force for Installations, Energy, and Environment. She's basically for all things installations, energy, and environment. She's at the Air Force Secretariat level. There's a contract through Omaha Corps with Nobilis to assist in evaluating critical paths on PFAS projects. For this group, that means they're going to help me look at interim actions for slip lining as well as groundwater extraction out here. When I get to that figure, I'll give you some more details. The picture tells it's a lot easier to absorb and understand when you look at it on a figure, but I won't get into that right now. So both of those efforts are going on, and they will also do a brief to the RAB for us in March. Their analysis, they're basically like a third-party look outside of Bill Meyer looking at interim actions. They're going to look at the stormwater lining as well as the groundwater extraction. And maybe they've come up with some other recommendations. Hey, maybe you should look at this. Have you considered that? So they're kind of like a third party. They're kind of neutral outside of what's going on here to look at potential options for us. Next slide. So here's the RI status. Field work was done in June of 23. We got validated data for soil, groundwater, surface water, sediment. Walt's got the figures that are updated. Scoping session for MOB 2. We're getting ready we're taking that validated data that we got from the first effort. We've got a draft addendum to the UFP QAP, which is the Unified Federal Policy Quality Assurance Project Plan. It's basically a work plan that says, here's where we're going to go, step out, do some additional sampling. So what's new to this, if you look on the fourth bullet, is when we did a contract modification to the RI. It's like about a $1.5 million contract mod to add 6 new locations. 5 of them were above the regional screening levels. Earlier, when we did the contract, EPA didn't have those new levels that they had out there for the different compounds. So we added these because we had soil concentrations or groundwater or sediment or a combination of thereof that were above it. So we're adding 6 new locations to the RI. In addition to that, Building 142, the former firefighting station, was also added. The last part of that was added was the new EPA method 1633, which covers more PFAS compounds than what the 537 covers. Next slide. And I think the next slide is just an update on what the UFP QAP addendum, what I just talked to you about. The idea is Air Guard and Army Corps of Engineers has that in hand right now. We've provided comments to AECOM. Walt's working through those comments. And as soon as we get through those comments, we're going to get it out to the regulators, the RAB, as well as the Department of Health. So they can get their eyes on it. Justin said he'll take a day and get it. No, just kidding. We're going to give them some time to absorb it, but then we're going to set up a technical project planning session that looks at the locations where we're going to go. So those 5 sites or those 6 sites, those are all starting over from scratch. So they had SI data. We're going to do similar level of effort what we did on the first MOB for all the other sites. So they're going to kind of be lagging a little bit behind. But the important part is the first mobilization data. We got step outs. We know where we need to go to get more information to validate the conceptual site model. And so we're going to go through all that with the regulators and that, and we'll give the RAB an update once that comes out, what it is. And we'll sit down with Justin and the health department folks, and they'll give us the thumbs up. And then sometime this spring, AECOM will be out in the field collecting more data. You know, some of the I don't want to say roadblocks, but some of the things that kind of slow us down will probably still be there again, like rights of entry for offsite locations, trying to get access. We just can't go on people's property. You know, we got to coordinate all that. But now we know where we're going. We're working with the Army Corps of Engineers to kind of help facilitate those rights of entry and get that done earlier than later. So next slide. Oh, this is the conceptual site model. I'm going to use that later today. I put the slides in here. It kind of helps
That
explain.
is a fabulous graphic. Thank you.
So keep that in mind. We'll bring that back up later. But so folks online, I'm not going to go over it right now. I'll save it to the end. Next slide. And off to Walt. I'm going to stop talking and let him do some talking.
Thanks, Bill. I'm Walt Howard. I'm AECOM's project manager. AECOM is conducting the PFAS investigation at the base. So the first slide here are just a list of figures that I'll go over quickly with you. All but the last figure on the bottom, which we'll talk in more detail later. All the rest of them are basically the same figures that I presented at the last RAB meeting in October. As Bill mentioned, we're in the process of writing our CLAP addendum, which is under review right now. So because of that, we haven't conducted any sampling since October. So therefore, these figures will be the same ones. So I'll go over these first ones kind of quickly, and then we'll spend more time on the last one. So next slide, please. So this first one's our mobilization one. Can everybody hear me okay back there? Okay. Mobilization one sample locations. There's 240 locations. We collected nearly 400 samples. That's stormwater, surface water, sediment, and groundwater. Groundwater collected from both the overburden and the bedrock aquifer. Next slide, please. So this is our figure on PFOS analytical results from groundwater samples collected from temporary groundwater sampling points in the overburden, as well as permanent overburden wells that were installed and sampled back during the site investigation. I'll just kind of go over this quickly. All the figures, they have the symbols for the sample locations are shaded. 1 of 5 colors, which basically represents the PFOS, the concentration range of PFOS that each sample result fell within. So, so with this one, I'll just say that, you know, like the gray colored shading, that's the lowest concentration is between PFOS being not detected up to the screening level of 4 parts per trillion. The next one up is yellow, which is PFOS at concentration between 4 and 100. The next one, orange, is concentrations between 100 and 1,000. And then the red is for 1,000 up to 10,000. And then the burgundy or dark red symbol, that's for concentrations that were between 10,000 and 35,000. So our groundwater samples, the overburden samples, we had exceedances of the screening level in over 90% of the samples that were collected. The greatest concentration were again concentrated down at the southern end of the base in the vicinity of the former firehouse, that's PRL 3, and then down around the wastewater lagoons there at the southern base boundary, and then between there down to Wreck Pond. So for mobilization 2, we'll install numerous additional temporary groundwater sampling points to step out and collect additional data. The intent being to define the, the lateral and vertical limit of contaminate or of PFAS impacts. So I don't have the locations to show you now. They're in the draft QAP, and they will need to be reviewed and approved by the regulators. Okay, next slide, please. So this is our sample results of groundwater samples collected from bedrock permanent monitoring wells. We installed 9 of them during mobilization 1, and then there's an additional 9 that were historical wells. So basically, PFOS concentrations in those range from low of 4 parts per trillion right at the screening level up to a high of about 650 parts per trillion. There's 2 wells, I just point out, to the east of Union Ave, between Union Ave and Lake Washington, and PFOS is not detected in either one of those wells. Yeah, they're hard to see because they're gray shaded, but they're, yeah. Next slide, please. And going, so these are the soil sample results. We had we collected 122 soil samples. In general, it was just, pretty much isolated exceedances of screening levels across most of the entire portion of the base. You can see there's a concentration of orange and red symbols down at the southern end of the base, and that's in the vicinity of the former fire station in the wastewater lagoons. So again, in mobilization 2, we'll do step out samples at each one of these exceedances to, just evaluate and hopefully define the limits of impacts at each one of those locations. Next slide, please. This is our stormwater sample location map and a summary of the CCTV survey. I'll point this out now because I'll talk about it later. The brown shaded sections of, so.
Bill, can you stand up and point
Yeah.
for those in the room, and I'll see if I can.
So we surveyed a total of 25,000 linear feet of the storm drain network with a crawler and a TV camera. And from there the purpose was to identify where there's sections of piping that were degraded or defective or, just impaired. And so the shaded sections, that's where the defective piping was found. But the sample results here are all those, again, the color-coded symbols. There was exceedances of the screening level in all the samples that we collected. The highest concentrations, there's 2 red locations, one at the south side of the apron and the other one down right near Wreck Pond, and that's in the basin for outfall number 3. And then there was a higher concentration in a manhole just to the east of the former fire station. So next, for mobilization 2, we'll do another round of stormwater sampling to evaluate the data in comparison with this initial round. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of PFOS concentrations in the surface water samples we collected. Again, if you can see, there's an inset map at the lower right-hand corner of this figure. So that's a zoomed in or blown up copy of the section in the vicinity of the wastewater lagoons and Wreck Pond. You can see those 2 reddest, the red and the burgundy symbols. Those are the highest concentrations detected. They're in a little wetland area that's just down gradient of the lagoons. Those concentrations were 4,900 and 6,900 parts per trillion. The orange symbols in Wreck Pond, all those concentrations were in the range of 400 to 600 parts per trillion. And then concentrations have generally decreased with distance downstream along Silver Stream from Rec Pond. There's also elevated concentrations in the wetland area to the east of the closed landfill. They were 150 and 170 parts per trillion. And then concentrations decreased downstream along Patton Brook from that area. During mobilization 2, our plan will be to sample, resample most of the MOB 1 surface water samples, just to be able to collect another round, be able to evaluate it for any trends or differences from the mobilization 1 samples. And then in addition, we're intending to do a number of new locations. It'll be step outs further distant downstream along the major drainage basins, just to get some information that's a little more distant from the base, to see if there's any further, expansion of PFAS levels. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this this slide is new since the October RAB, and the purpose of it is to evaluate areas of the stormwater piping that has the potential to intercept contaminated groundwater. So we started with the last stormwater map that I was showing you, our sampling map. So that we have on here presented the results of the CCTV survey. So it shows that defective portions of the piping that we surveyed. I'll try. So again, the brown shaded sections of the piping, that's where we found defects in the piping during our CCTV survey. And now we added to this the symbols on each one of the structures along the storm drain network that would be manholes or catch basins. We shaded those red or yellow, and that is a result of our evaluation of the elevation of the inverts of all the piping relative to the groundwater table. So there's red and yellow symbols there. Red symbols indicate where the structures and the piping inverts are below the water table. Those are areas that have the potential for groundwater to infiltrate into the piping. And then the yellow symbols are locations where the piping is above the water table. So there should be little or no potential for groundwater to infiltrate into the piping. So to go on, there's a lot of information on this map, I know. And the next one is, so we brought in the PFOS concentrations that we got from our groundwater sampling of the overburden wells. And so that's represented by those blue lines or contours. Those are called iso concentration contours. Of PFOS concentration. So iso concentration contour that connects points of equal concentrations of PFOS in the aquifer. It's similar to a topographic contour on a topo map, which connects points of equal ground elevation. So the values of those contours, they range between a low of 4 parts per trillion, which is the screening level, the RSL for PFOS, to a high of 4,000 parts per trillion. And there's two areas, one in the vicinity of the wastewater lagoons that Bill just pointed out, and another one just to the north of the former firehouse. Right in there at PRL 6. So with this information, Air National Guard will be able to make an evaluation or determination of the sections of piping that may need to be repaired as an interim action. So in summary, and we have a little box there with a summary of the 25,000 linear feet that we did the survey on. We found that a little over 3,700 lineal feet is defective. It's below the water table. It's in contact with PFOS contaminated groundwater, so it has the potential to intercept contaminated groundwater. That's pretty much it. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so the figure that explains it all. No, it has actually, seeing the figure gives you a great idea visually, you know, what's going on. What's really important on here is these stormwater lines where they're defective. So you see that's defective here, this is defective, this is all defective. These are down here, but the takeaway, red dots below the water table. These blue ISO concentration lines, we've got 40 parts per trillion coming through here. There's some 4 parts per trillion, 10. This is all going on up here, but I think the more important takeaway, so these stormwater lines are probably receiving contaminated groundwater. But down here, where the lagoons are and Rec Pond are, we've got the 4,000 parts per trillion. And inside of these dots, there's a 35,000, there's a 20,000. So we got high concentrations of PFOS in the groundwater down here. You can see these defective stormwater lines. So these are a mechanism that's potentially, you know, if that's infiltrating these storm lines that discharge in the Rec Pond, that's going in there. Another takeaway with this visual is the groundwater table is interconnected with Rec Pond. So groundwater is also flowing in a southeast direction into Rec Pond. So when we look at evaluating interim actions, repairing these storm lines so they don't leak. But the other thing that we're going to look at is maybe hydraulically controlling some of the PFAS contaminated groundwater. A combination of those two things is probably going to help reduce what's going into Rec Pond, you know, and still continued operation of the stormwater treatment system but, you know, remediation 101, if you don't treat the sources, I mean, ideally, we'd like to find the soil source that's causing all this. We may not be able to do that, but that's what the supplemental data for the next phase that Walt's going to do. Well, not him personally. He'll be out there with his crews looking for more information, doing the drilling and sampling. But that's, so interim action wise, that's what I asked that critical path analysis team. I said, I want you to look at the groundwater option for this. I want you to look at stormwater lining for these lines that are below the water table. Down here, we've got some lines that are above the water table. They're yellow. But up here, you know, these are below, but these are all intact according to the camera survey. So I would see focusing on, you know, the shaded lines that need repair that are below the water table. Because if we go back to the conceptual site model, the 3D thing, real quick, it'll all be clear. All right, where are you at? All right, right here. So this figure, we're going to have to adjust this. We're going to pull the water table up because some pipes are above the water table, some are below. What we're thinking, you know, we're going to modify this, but so you see the pipe, there's contaminated groundwater going into the pipe. That's going into Rec Pond, that's going down. So basically, that just kind of gives you the visual of what's going on. Ideally, if we can find the source areas in the soil that are above the water table, we could do, you know, a soil removal action on that. But we haven't found them yet because of what Walt said. We've only got like very few points that are actually impacted above the water table that we've been able to find. We know we've had releases. I mean, we got them documented. So the groundwater data is going to actually help focus this, and hopefully maybe we can find some of those source areas that's creating it. So I thought this was good to have just as a kind of a visual for folks to get an understanding. So, all right. So I'm going to stop talking.
I am sure you have questions on this, and I want to allow time for those questions. I also want to do a time check because it's 7:28 and this meeting is supposed to adjourn at 7:30. I'm going to guess that your questions probably will exceed 2 minutes, and we haven't even had an opportunity for questions from the public. So I want to see, first of all, if people are okay with staying a little longer. I do not want to go more than a half hour maximum. Okay, in just the interest of everybody's time. So that would be the max. That said, I want to allow time for your questions. We also still have a presentation by Doug Close on the interim stormwater treatment system. And so I want to know, do you want to do the questions kind of quickly and get to the interim stormwater treatment system? Doug, my understanding is Doug's presentations are an update, a quarterly update of the data. I don't know if you can, I mean, everybody's got the slides. I don't know if you want to present that, just focus in on the changes, the things that are different without going into the detail of all the slides. I want to get a feel for what you all RAB members want to do with our remaining time, because I don't think we can allow enough time for all of it.
I prefer this.
Dan would prefer to focus on the RI and the conceptual site model and this information. Sorry, Doug, thanks for flying out.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Yes.
So your speaker's on.
What is on?
Do others, Dan is one RAB member. Do other people agree? I'm seeing nods around the table. Okay. So we're going to go ahead with discussion of and questions on the things that Bill just presented. If we have time to get to the interim stormwater treatment system or highlights of your presentation, Doug, we will try to do that. Okay. All right. Questions? Yes. Go ahead, Jay.
Jay Beaumont, community RAB member. So looking at that slide and kind of translating it into 3D, you're looking at possibly putting some wells or some sort of remediation measure kind of at wherever you find the tip of that pink plume is the first kind of, I'm just kind of.
Yeah, you're correct. In between Rec Pond and where the source is, we would do something to hydraulically control the groundwater flow from going into Rec Pond.
Okay.
So anything that we can do to prevent that. Now, knowing the soil types and all that out there, it's silty clay. Talking with Walt, maybe it's a trench that we do, a collection trench. Maybe we don't know. I mean, if it was all like beach sand, we could definitely put in wells and extract water. But out here, I don't think we have that opportunity. But it may be some kind of, interceptor trench. We don't know, but we're going to get to that when we look at with that CPA, with the critical path analysis. That's something that we're going to bring up, and I'm sure they'll look at it. We can't do groundwater extraction here. And I'm like, no, but we can intercept it maybe with a trench. So that's so we can actually capture and control that to prevent it from migrating into the pond. So that's one thing.
Okay. So the remediation of the pipes.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of them are black or red, I mean.
Yep.
So, and
They're all below the water table. Yep. All this.
Are most of them like, 12 inches in diameter or 24 inches in diameter or?
It's a combination of a bunch.
Okay. And that one, the big guy coming under 17K, is that? How big is that?
17K. It's probably like 8-foot diameter or something like that.
8-foot diameter? It's big. Okay. That gives me that's a lot of water.
So small to big, right? And that's why we want to get the answer to the diversion piece as well, because it's a lot of volume.
So just from perhaps Lieutenant Colonel can answer, are we looking slip lining or are we looking at something where they dig up the pipes and put in new pipes?
That's a great question. And that's why, the slip lining is kind of the terminology used in the Codell letter. It's not that easy. I wish it was.
Yeah.
Slip lining is effective maybe up to about 24 inches. Beyond that, you're looking at full depth repairs. Not to mention manholes that have inverts that are below. Well, that's going to have to be a manhole ceiling. This is repair work. The scope will be, will be sort of a wicked problem, putting the scope together and focusing those resources on where we're having groundwater intrusion. That's potentially part of the area of interest, part of the contamination. And so yeah, that's sort of the next steps in this immediate actions or interim actions.
I mean, the third party contractor is Nobilis. They're going to look at the stormwater, overall. They're going to look at the groundwater contamination. I've already had kind of a kickoff meeting with them to kind of share information. I gave them Walt's contact information because they want data. They want to look at this, but they're going to look at, what we kind of propose. Maybe they got some other ideas. I'm Bill Meyer. I only got 28 years of cleanup experience, but maybe they got more, someone else that, hey, did you ever think about doing this? So hopefully this third party looking at the data, and that's going to help, open our eyes up, or they may go, Bill Meyer, you're the smartest guy in the world. You picked what we thought we were going to do. So I don't know. We're going to see.
Okay, one last comment, if I may.
Okay.
In a past life, I was involved in leak detection for water systems.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we found was that the trench is a great avenue for water to travel in. So those trenches for all those pipes, maybe
Conduits. Yep.
it's not just the plume like you pick, it might be actually the expressway for the water, if you will, and the dirt is kind of the side street avenue for the water. So it becomes then two things. One, you fix the pipe, but now you got to think about, okay, what am I going to do with all these trenches that got gravel in them instead of silt and clay, and what the water's going to do.
No, I was going to say that highlights what Bill was saying too. Is that let's not get tunnel vision on the slip lining or the stormwater repair. I really need to get rid of that word. It's the stormwater repair system, because we also need to look at the groundwater and what it's doing and how it's going directly to Rec Pond. So there is a process for this interim actions, so that we don't get the sort of the blinders, the tunnel vision, and focus too much on one solution and ignore what may be another opportunity, or even bigger opportunity to have a bigger impact with these interim opportunities.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Chuck CAC, what's the schedule again? Remind me on a novelist action.
I just met with them this week, and we're working with Walt to get them the data. They said it takes them about 3 months to go through this process. So if they get the data and they're able to do the evaluation, there's going to be an outbrief that I'm going to be part of. But then they said that they would give that outbrief, that similar outbrief to the RAB. Here's our findings. Here's what we looked at, and this would work, but this won't. But they can also support us in providing a cost estimate to do all this stuff. That's what I need help with, because I'm a geologist, not a civil engineer. I could do a pump test for you, but I can't tell you how to repair a stormwater system. I could probably get you close, but so they're going to do that. But then there's on the CERCLA process. So let's say, after they get done with this, they make this recommendation, do X and X. With, there might be little caveats with it. I don't know what their final outcome is going to be, but when we'll take that information, and the next part of the CERCLA process is we do it's called a non-time critical removal action. Remember the presentation that I did on the interim actions? So they'll do that non-time critical removal action, which will do an ECA, which is an engineering evaluation cost analysis. They'll look at all these different technologies. They'll come up with a recommendation. It's not just going to be one technology. So for the stormwater repair, there might be 5 different ways to, there's multiple ways that you can fix a problem, right? They'll come up with these different options and costs associated with them. And it's not just going to be the stormwater repair. It could be stormwater repair, groundwater, hydraulically controlling the groundwater, whatever they come up with. It could be three things. Maybe they're going to see something that we don't see. I kind of got a vision that it's going to be two things, but that's just Bill Meyer. So once they do that, that goes out for public comment. So we got to do a 30-day public comment period on that because we're going to come to the public. Hey, we're looking at, doing X and X. What do you think? And I'll be here at the RAB. I'll do another meeting, one of our RAB meetings, or it could be separate. It doesn't necessarily have to be at a RAB meeting because it's open to the public. We'll come back up here and do, here's a presentation on the ECA and what it recommended, and here's the recommendations, and here's what we're thinking. And then we'll get input. Yeah.
Back from them after you get the information to them. So maybe
There's yeah.
And then a comment period at that point or no?
No. Separate.
Okay.
So this is just an external
talking a year.
evaluation.
A year.
Yeah.
A year.
Yep.
Trying to put it into some ballpark.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So once we do that, once we get the comments back, and then the next step after that is we do an action memorandum, which basically it's a decision document. We selected technology X and X.
Yep.
But the good news is while I'm doing all this, I'm parallel path programming dollars to go towards it. I'm not waiting until, okay, we're going to wait till the end. I mean, we kind of got an idea what they are. So I'm hoping to get, some cost estimates and that to support it. The ECA evaluates the cost range, but I can program dollars to get those in there to basically be prepared because I can adjust up or I can adjust down. I mean, I've done contracts where I've sent money back, done contracts where I had to request more money. But either way, I'm programming it because we know it's coming. And as long as, with this third-party evaluation, it comes back and everyone's good, then, we'll go with their recommendations and move forward.
Other questions?
Yes.
Dan?
Thanks. So first of all, thanks. It's good to see progress in the contours and some of the issues that you flagged the last meeting that were next steps. I don't want to miss the chance to present a petition, 967 signatures urging much the same actions as the federal letter that you referenced on these types of interim remedial actions. I'll leave this with you. Ed got a copy earlier. I have copies of the text, not the names for everyone else. But I do want to ask a couple of questions. First of all, the third-party review, which is great to get those ideas. We have the DEC, which is a third party. As I understand it, has not received the data from Mobilization 1. Is that right? And can we get them as a third party first or in parallel to get these? Because I know there have been things, the term slip lining, the things on the expansion of the stormwater system, these kind of variables that we've been focused on are not all coming from our heads. We know that these are things that have been written into DEC responses to your plans, and it seems like we're not getting enough. We want that third party first as a key partner. And I know you described them as a partner in the letter.
Right.
But it seems like there's a point here where they need to, get in there with those details. I'll say also for the RAB, we have some expanded technical ability with our Riverkeeper scientists now on staff, and also with the TAP application reaching point. So we're going to want to be able to look at that data as well. So I want to flag that as an emerging need. So I'll let you respond to this.
No, yeah, I mean, with this the critical path analysis, they're going to work, with the regulators. This is like a new thing. It just came up like over Christmas, so. Right, exactly. Yeah, because we did the kickoff meeting, I think it was over Christmas, they talked about it, but then we just had the meeting the other day that, yeah, we're going to go forward with this. So it's new. So, but sharing the data, yes, I mean, they want to, DEC is going to be part of it. They told us, whoever needs to be part of it, and they'll come and brief, the RAB that's, what their findings in that are. So DEC is going to get a lot of the data when they get this draft WAP addendum because you've already seen some of the figures up here that had that data on there, but it's not ISO concentration maps and all this other good stuff. But we're going to have a discussion with DEC. It'll probably be during the middle of the CPA analysis, but then also, when we do our technical project planning, that's where we're going to get the kind of the feedback, and we'll sit down with them and go over all the data. So critical path analysis.
So they're not, DEC's not going to see this for a while.
Well,
The
I'm
data.
hoping the QAP addendum is going to be out here soon. So we can probably, what's your estimate?
For WAP addendum?
Yeah, QAP addendum.
Shortly after that, yeah. They're gonna have time that they're gonna
So-
need to review it and then,
First quarter 2024.
I'm sorry?
First quarter 2024?
Yeah, that's our, on our schedule. We're shooting for the,
Spring of this
spring
year.
of 2024, hopefully it's early spring. But it's gonna depend on, what we need to do to get the approval of the clap.
Thank you.
Other questions? We are very short on time. Jennifer. So,
I know.
no, you're
Sorry.
good. You're good. Bill, answer more concisely, please.
I have two questions, very different, but the fingerprinting study fingerprint study for the PFAS.
Yep.
whatever, is that in terms because you have down to discriminate among potential sources, but is that implying, are you talking about other parties that could be accountable for what's on the base, or are you looking at other areas that imply something different? Or is this also?
I think it's a combination of both.
And is this also about identifying more variants or whatever you want to call them, because EPA is now adding more to their list, or what is, because especially if it's implying that there may be other parties to partake in this wonderful process, I just feel that was a very quick comment.
Yeah, no, I think it's a combination of both. Because we know what the base used. We got photo documentation. They got jugs of, X, and they're going to look at, we think that there might be other sources coming onto the base. This wasn't driven by that because this was an Air Force. So we're one of 7 bases where they're doing this fingerprinting. Air National Guard got 2. One's at Iowa. I don't know the specific.
Okay, but you're not
date.
leaving this process anytime soon.
What's that?
It's not, never mind. I'm just, we're still in this process, so it's not about all of a sudden like certain areas just.
Oh, no, we're not trying to chalk up, right? We're not going to do anything over here because we found
Oh.
this was someone else's stuff.
Thank you.
We're going to deal with what we released, obviously, but the fingerprinting can help differentiate is it all us or is it partly, some other sources, because other people have used AFFF in the area. It's not just Air National Guard.
Okay, and then.
Jennifer, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. You're going to ask a question. I'm letting our audio guy know that I'm also going to call on Bill Fetter, who's online and is a RAB member, has a question. So he's next. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Remember, I think our last meeting, there were maps with the piping and showing where there wasn't a survey done and what was going to be done. Are we assuming that all the pipes are done now and we're not needing to explore more, or you're continuing to explore? What percentage do you need to still do?
Of investigating the pipes?
Yeah.
We've done all the major trunk lines, right? It's.
Okay.
Yep.
Walt Howard, yes, we've done the 3 major trunk lines for the 3 outfalls. We've done the entire lengths of all of them. Everything else beyond that is, by and large above the water table. They haven't, those sections haven't been, they haven't been surveyed. Some of it has, some of it hasn't, but it's, it's all off the major trunk lines and everything there is higher elevation. So
So no more to-do list. on that. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Bill, hopefully we'll be able to hear you.
Bill Fetter, I'm curious if there's any reasonable correlation between ISO concentrations and topography, or what is controlling the shapes of these plumes.
Okay, you can shut her down. I got the
Okay.
question. So ISO concentrations, if you look at a cross section, does topography affect, the concentrations in the groundwater below? And I would say that what affects the concentrations is what's in the groundwater, what's on so if you look at the plume where this 4,000, if there was a hill sitting on top of this, would that hill make a difference as to that ISO concentration looking the way it does? And I would have to say, no, because groundwater flows from just like surface water from high to low. There's a dispersion pattern, how it you look at the shape of these, like off to the, I guess would be the southeast part of the base. If you look at that little bullseye with the 400 and all that, the way these things look, I think groundwater flow direction affects more what it looks like. But then also you got to take into effect, there's a lot of poetic license that goes into making these ISO concentrations. This was probably a groundwater modeling program. It's a modeling program, so it numerically crunches the numbers and comes up with it. So you take them for face value. It's a tool. It's not absolute, but topography doesn't affect, I don't believe, how a plume would look. So hopefully that answers your question.
We have 10 minutes left, and we do have a couple public comments. So I want to get to those as well. My understanding is that Joseph Minuta has asked about removal of carbon filters and PFAS in Washington Lake. Yes, could you read the question? Bill, could you hand her the mic or read the question per se?
Okay, so his
Read it.
question was, why were the carbon filters removed? Are there still PFOAs in Washington Lake? What is being done to maintain the lake levels so they don't encroach adjacent properties? He submitted this question when you were talking about the, right at the beginning, when you were talking about the, excuse me. Yeah.
Oh, were you home when you wrote those? Oh, well, welcome.
So you're talking about the carbon systems in Lake Washington? There's a couple different systems out there. There was one. All right. Justin? Finally, I get to hand the mic off.
So that's, all those cheers are for safety, so please be careful.
Justin Starr, New York State DEC. So the Route 300 drawdown system was not intended as a remedial system. So that system was intended to control lake levels to make sure that water level wouldn't overtop the dam at Masterson Park and Lockwood Basin. So about a year or so ago, we talked with the city. The dam was rehabbed. Those repairs are complete. So the drawdown system was no longer necessary. Right now, water level rises naturally, goes over the spillway into Lockwood Basin as it normally would. So again, that system was not intended to clean up the lake. It was intended to control the lake levels to allow the dam rehab to proceed.
You can hand him the mic for asking his question though, Justin.
It's natural. It rises and flows over the spillway. So the question was, how are lake levels being maintained now? But they're not encroaching on adjacent properties. Well, actually, call on Jason if you want to chime in on this one. It is city property.
Please introduce yourself.
Jason Morris, Commissioner of Public Works, City Engineer for City of Newburgh. Member of the public, but I'll speak on the issue. So the city did rebuild the dam, finished that about a little over a year ago. And the lake levels are continuing to increase now since DEC removed the drawdown system. The lake levels will go up from where they are now, maybe about another foot, and then they'll begin to overtop the Washington Lake Dam spillway, go down to Lockwood Basin, and then proceed down into the Quisea Creek. So to answer your question, there's nothing being done right now to stop the encroachment of water on the neighboring properties. It will continue to encroach as it has before in years past, and then it will overtop the dam. It's about a foot from the distance it is now.
So, interesting. Can you pull up the other slide that you had there?
Which one? The cross section?
The testing sections.
Oh, yeah. Which one
Back
specifically?
up one more. Oh, no, next. I'm sorry, these aren't in sync here. I'm looking for the Washington Lake portion that you guys had tested.
Oh, the surface water sampling. Yeah, there's a larger. It's one of the end ones.
There you go, that's fine. You see the bottom southern portion tip of Washington Lake? Right there.
Okay.
Perfect. That's my backyard.
Okay. Oh, there's one that actually has surface water samples in it. Just keep going down. Oh, right here, this one.
Yes.
This yellow one, yep. So it's 4 to 100 parts per trillion.
So if that water is to go onto somebody's property, would that PFAS then be also going onto somebody's property? Is it's what's from, right?
Yes. Yep. So if it's in the surface water, it can go into the groundwater, and vice versa. If it's in the groundwater, it can go into the surface water. So groundwater, being under the soil, lake water, so there's an intersection there. If you look at a cross-section view, groundwater sometimes feeds into surface water bodies, or it can be the other way around. Surface water bodies feed into groundwater where it flows away from it. So
If that water were to come off and travel, that would then pollute another downstream system.
it could, depending on the groundwater flow coming in there. Yep. All right.
Thank you for your questions. Another public question, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shannon Roback. I'm the science director at Riverkeeper. I have a follow-up question, actually.
Sure.
Do you have a model or even a preliminary fate and transport model of the geographic extent of the plume? And if not, when will you have that? And also, will that be based on PFOA, PFOS, the 537 compounds, the 1633 compounds?
So for groundwater model or fate and transport model?
Groundwater plume specifically.
Yeah, so
with the data that we've, generated to date, and then we're going to generate more data through the next mobilization, 2 more mobilizations. So, and then as we generate more data, it'll go into the model. Those blue lines on that map are just the beginning of it, and it's using the data that we collected from mobilization 1 on the base. It's for now, it's only, the output of it is only for PFOS. And the purpose of that is that it's, almost exclusively found to be, at the highest concentration of the samples that we've collected. So it's a good, it's really the driver, for our investigations. It's a good, it's a good indicator for,
other compounds.
Other compounds. It's, but it's just, that's the tool we're using to help guide our investigation.
So again, do you have a sense for the extent, or when will you know when do you think you'll have an idea for the geographic extent of the plume?
Okay, the question is, do we know when we're going to have the extent of the plume documented, in a report? So how long is it going to take to delineate? We know the toe of the plume is 1.2 miles off the base, or whatever the distance is, whatever it is. So right now, with the characterization process, we did the initial MOB. That was temporary wells. I'll just talk about groundwater because all these other things, there's different things that their purposes why we do it. We use temporary wells to try to get the side gradients and down gradient and up gradient. We're not there yet. So a lot of the stuff was on the base for the first go around. We did some off base stuff. We drilled some bedrock wells. We've got, in the overburden, we've got temporary wells. We haven't even put in any permanent monitoring wells in because we're trying to define that vertical and lateral extent of contamination. So this next round is going to be more temporary wells to further expand. How far does it go down, this direction? How far does it go this way? Do we need to go in an intermediate depth from the groundwater down to that bedrock interface? They're going to look at all those different things. Once we get a better handle on that, the third mobilization, we're going to put in permanent monitoring wells because by then we should have the extent of contamination pretty well bracketed in. I mean, it's kind of like field artillery. We're trying to bracket, our rounds in to get it dialed in to where the left and right limits are. So does that answer your question? I mean, it's going to take some time. We're on the second mobilization. I think the third mobilization will probably, fall, winter of, winter 25 or earlier. If with this next mobilization, we got it defined. I don't think we are, but, never know. But so those things take time, but that's the kind of the investigation process that we're going through to delineate it.
We have one more question that was typed in. The one about from Tasman Hollow about explaining to a small child. If you could read that one, Bill, if you could hand her the mic. There may be other questions, and I apologize. This is the first meeting in a long time that we have not potentially gotten to everyone's questions, but I don't want to keep people beyond 2.5 hours for this RAB meeting. So we'll skip ahead to the slide that gives Dan's email address. This is a standing, it's at all of our RAB meetings, but this time actually, Dan, you might actually get some more questions that will be submitted to us, and we'll answer those in writing and get those out to people. And I encourage you to look at Doug Close's presentation on the interim stormwater treatment system. And if you have questions about that presentation that you never heard, please put those into those questions to Dan as well. And so with that, Johanna, if you would read out one last public question, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so Tasman asked, this was a little bit earlier, if you had to describe your plan to a small child, what would that sound like? How would you explain the relevance of these high concentrations being above or below the water table? And then she had a follow-on question, are any special actions being taken to protect human health on the base?
Okay.
Well, let me hit the first one. How would I put this in terms, maybe I guess for a first grader or something?
I think
So-
especially, I would say especially focused on the storm sewers and above and below the water table and the high concentration.
So I would try to, how do I do this? So I guess I would try to explain it, in some kind of visual way that we could, if there's an area, a concentration, maybe there's something that I could compare, like a drop of cooking oil in a large pool or something, or show them, here's a bucket of water. Here's this concentration. You take this little drop of cooking oil, see how it spreads out on the water. That's what it's doing below the ground surface. So you can't see below the ground surface, but this little drop, what that number, that concentration is in the water. That's about the only way I could best describe it. And then other than, water below the surface and on the surface flows from high to low. So I could have a board sloped and see how water rolls down it. Well, groundwater is the same way below the ground surface. So when you get this drop of oil that's on the groundwater below the surface, it flows that same direction from high to low. Then does that same drop stay intact? No, it actually spreads out. It's like a piece of dough. So if I'm making a pizza dough, rolling it out, starts out as a big ball, but eventually I flatten it out and it gets flattened up like that. So hopefully that answers the question. I don't want to talk to, not used to explaining it that way, but maybe I should. Hey.
This is why I have a job, which is sometimes trying to walk that line between explaining the technical and to the lay public. Thank you, Bill, for trying to do that. I appreciate everybody's involvement and your input. I know we're all passionate about this and have a lot of questions. And I apologize that we may not have gotten to all of your questions, so I encourage you to submit those and we will get those responses back to you.
Question, I think,
I'm not going to take any other public questions right now. We're just going to have to stop.
Ed did have a closing.
Ed does?
Ed,
We can get him.
He just wanted to say thank everyone on his behalf.
Okay.
Also, he sent me with the donuts, take them home.
I wish I'd known we wouldn't have bought as many cookies. So take the cookies home too as well. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel.
Thank you all for coming. There was a second part to the public question, and I wanted to address it. What are we doing to protect airmen, big A airmen, our civilian and state employees and contractors who come on base? We drink City of Newburgh water, right? We are not a domestic water provider. We get our water from the City of Newburgh. And that's the water that we drink out of our water fountains on base, right? And so that's it. We're a part of this community too. We're drinking the same stuff, and that's it. We don't have any secrets about how we treat our water differently. We're not in the potable water making business. That's the City of Newburgh, and that's where we get our source to. So thank you all for this open discussion and for coming out and making the time on behalf of Colonel Fairley, and I look forward to the next one. Thanks.
Thank you so much, folks, and thank you for staying late. I appreciate it. With this, I'm going to close the meeting. Please send your comments or additional questions to Dan. That email's at the end of the presentation, and we'll get written responses back to you. Thanks, everybody. Good night.